Tonight, beneath the quiet hum of ancient stones and the whisper of forgotten prayers, we walk into a history the church tried to bury. A story not written in ink, but in fire. A story that still breathes beneath the marble of the Vatican itself. Every echo you'll hear tonight once had a heartbeat. Every silence once had a name. And though centuries have tried to erase them, their song, the hum beneath the ashes, still calls to anyone willing to listen. So before we begin, take a breath, dim the lights, and if stories like this awaken something in you, subscribe, tap the notification bell, and stay close, because the next revelation won't wait for dawn. Now, let the fire remember. You walk where the wind still smells faintly of ash. The stones under your feet remember heat, the kind that does not fade with centuries. Somewhere nearby, water drips from an old fountain, and each drop sounds like a heartbeat. The square is empty now, but once it wasn't. Once, the air here shimmered with firelight and cries. Once, the church called this mercy. You kneel, touch the ground. The cobblestones are smooth, but in the silence you can almost hear the voices that burned here. The fire did not kill them, it recorded them. The crackle of the flame became the first archive of the forgotten. The air itself became their witness. No one speaks of this place. Guides lead tourists past it quickly, their voices cheerful, practiced. But if you stop, if you let your breath slow enough, you will feel something move beneath the skin of the city. A faint hum, the pulse of a memory that refuses burial. The fire remembers. The Vatican feared many things: heresy, rebellion, hunger, desire. But nothing frightened it like a woman who could heal. A woman who looked at a wound and saw not sin, but balance. A woman who knew that pain was not punishment, but language. They called her witch. You imagine her standing here on the morning of her death, her hands bound, her face calm. The priest called her possessed, but the truth was simpler. She was unowned. Her prayers were not to heaven, but to the soil. She whispered to roots. She believed the earth could forgive. That was the danger, because if the people learned they could speak to the divine without permission, if they learned they could be healed without hierarchy, the church's gates would crumble. The witch represented something unbearable, faith without control. You can still smell the herbs on her breath: sage, rosemary, something older. They burned her for them. They said the smoke carried demons. But the demons they spoke of were only shadows of their own fear. For centuries, the church tried to erase this memory. It wrote of witches as monsters, as lovers of the devil, as mothers of chaos. But you have walked too deep into the silence to believe that. You feel it now. The truth is not evil. It is wounded. When the fire touched her, she did not scream. She sang. Not loudly, not in defiance, but softly. A hum that trembled through the wood, through the air, through time. Some said it was madness. Others said it was the devil leaving her. But those who listened carefully heard something else. It was the sound of the earth remembering her. That hum lives still. It moves through the soil, through roots, through seeds that sleep and wake with the seasons. It carries knowledge the church could never burn. The recipes whispered to heal fever, the prayers sung to guide birth, the songs that kept the night alive. She was not the first. She was not the last. Each pyre was a book the church tried to close, and each flame turned its pages. The Vatican's own archivists wrote that strange lights appeared above the fires, globes of blue and gold that hovered like silent witnesses. No one could explain them. They called them omens, but maybe they were memories escaping the body, refusing to be silenced. You rise, walking slowly through the square. The shadows stretch long, crossing each other like the lattice of a forgotten sigil. Every corner of the city holds another story. Some are buried beneath chapels, some beneath stone, some within the pulse of air itself. The Church teaches that God speaks through light, but light can also burn. The witches knew another kind of faith, one that glowed instead of consumed. They believed the body was sacred, not shameful, that the moon was scripture, that water was a hymn, that the devil was not a being, but a metaphor for control. And maybe that was why the Vatican feared them so deeply, because in their silence, in their stillness, they carried the one truth no fire could destroy. That divinity did not live in the sky, it lived in breath. As you leave the square, you turn once more. The stones glimmer faintly under the fading sun, as if remembering the glow. You whisper, almost without knowing why, "I remember you." And in the quiet that follows, you hear it again, faint but certain, a hum beneath the wind. The fire remembers. You walk beneath frescoed ceilings where angels look down with eyes too human. Their painted wings gleam under candlelight, but their smiles are thin. Somewhere below, you hear the tolling of bells, slow, deliberate, ritual. The Vatican at midnight is a cathedral of silence. You know why you are here. You are following a question the Church never wanted asked. Why did it fear witches more than the devil? The answer begins with a lie. For centuries, the Church used the devil as a compass. Every fear pointed toward him. Every rebellion, every sickness, every doubt, all his doing. The devil was convenient. He could be blamed, condemned, contained. His mythology built walls around belief. But witches, they were something else. They did not fit the story. The devil was control through fear. Witches were freedom through understanding. You pass through a corridor lined with old portraits, cardinals in red robes, faces pale as parchment. Their eyes follow you. Each one helped craft the narrative, the idea that woman was doorway, that temptation was female, that curiosity was sin. It was easier to fear women than to admit envy of their power. They said witches danced with demons, but the dance they described was older, an ancient ritual of balance between life and death. They said witches spoke in tongues, but they were listening to wind, to river, to flame. They said witches stole power, but they were only remembering it. The devil was never the threat. He was a story written to mask the true fear, independence. You reach a small archive behind the altar. Few enter here. The walls are lined with locked drawers. Inside are transcripts, inquisitions, confessions, dreams. You pull one at random. The ink is brown with age. It reads, "She confessed to knowing the language of herbs and to praying to the moon. She claimed to heal without relics. She refused to kneel." The sentence follows, "Death by purification through fire." The Vatican called it cleansing, but what they were cleansing was not evil, it was difference. Every woman who refused to fit their vision became a mirror reflecting what they could not control: the body's wisdom, the earth's rhythm, the soul's autonomy. The devil was safe because he was external. The witch was dangerous because she lived within. The Church's theology depended on separation: heaven above, earth below, spirit divided from flesh. But witches blurred those lines. They said heaven was here. They said divinity was in touch, in seed, in rain, in childbirth. They said the soul did not need saving, it needed remembering, and that made them heretics. The devil was a scapegoat. The witch was competition. You find a small note in the margin of one confession, written by an inquisitor. Her eyes glowed when she spoke of light within. It frightened me. You close the drawer slowly, fear masquerading as holiness, authority disguising itself as virtue. That was how the Vatican won its war, not through truth, but through repetition. The witch trials were not chaos, they were design. Each accusation served a purpose: to turn people away from inner knowing, to make them believe that salvation could only be granted from above. to teach them to distrust their own senses. When the church burned witches, it was burning witnesses, those who remembered the world before obedience. You step into the basilica again. The candles flicker as though listening. Somewhere behind you, a door closes softly. Maybe a draft, maybe not. The air feels heavier now, charged with centuries of guilt. The frescoes above seem to shift in the dim light. The angels' eyes are no longer gentle. They look tired. Maybe they, too, are weary of guarding a story that was never fully true. You think of the women who healed children with wild thyme and honey, who guided births under moonlight, who buried herbs at crossroads for luck. They never called themselves witches. The church gave them that name. It was a weapon disguised as a word. The devil needed belief. The witch needed memory. You begin to understand now why fear of the devil built the church, but fear of the witch preserved it. The devil unified the faithful through terror. Witches could have freed them through understanding. The church could afford demons. It could not afford truth. You leave the archive behind. The bells toll once more, echoing through marble halls. Somewhere in that sound, faint and buried, you hear another rhythm, not of warning, but awakening. Because even the Vatican, in its silence, still hums with what it tried to hide. The fire may have burned flesh, but it could not burn resonance. The witch's song lingers, softer than prayer, deeper than sin. And as you walk into the night, you realize the devil was never beneath them. He was above them, painted in gold, seated in marble, cloaked in authority. The real rebellion was never against God. It was against forgetting. You wake before dawn in a small village once swallowed by fog. The air carries the scent of wet earth and crushed rosemary. A bell rings somewhere far off, but it is not a call to prayer. It is a warning. The church's shadow reaches even here. But for now, the land still breathes freely. You walk past fields of lavender and sage. The women tending them move silently, their faces half hidden by scarves. They glance at you, cautious but curious. Their hands are stained with soil and oil, the fingerprints of old knowledge. Each carries a small pouch of herbs, tied with red thread. Not ornament, but protection. They are not witches here. They are curanderas, medege, wise women, depending on the tongue of the land. Names change, but their purpose does not. They heal, they listen, they remember. In the folds of their aprons, they keep leaves and roots with names older than Latin. Their mothers taught them that every wound has a song, that fever hums high, that grief hums low, that to heal is to match the note. They were doctors before doctors, chemists before alchemists, and priests before priests. But in the Vatican's eyes, they were heretics. You stop at one small cottage built of stone and moss. Inside, smoke curls through the beams. A pot boils on the fire. The old woman who stirs it hums under her breath, a melody that feels like the heartbeat of the world. She motions for you to sit. You do. The room smells of thyme, honey, and something metallic, blood, perhaps, or iron in the air. This, she says softly, is what they burned. Not the pot, not the herbs, not even the woman. This, the act of remembering how to mend without permission. She lifts a sprig of mugwort from the table. They called it witchcraft, she says, but it was just medicine before men took it away. You watch as she grinds the leaves into paste, mixes them with oil, and spreads it across a linen cloth. For burns, she explains, for fever, for childbirth when the pain turns cruel. She hands it to you, smiling faintly. The Vatican said it was the devil's work. But I say, what devil heals? Her laughter is low, like thunder rolling behind clouds. Outside, dawn brightens the mist. Roosters call. The air tastes clean. Yet beneath that peace, you feel the tremor of fear, not of demons, but of discovery. The church's messengers come often, carrying lists of names whispered by frightened neighbors. The women know that any day could be their last. Still, they heal. Still they plant. Still they sing. You follow the old woman into her garden. Rows of plants shimmer with dew. She touches each one gently, whispering words you cannot quite understand. The language is part Latin, part prayer, part sound. Every herb has its angel, she tells you, but not all angels wear wings. You realize then that this garden is her cathedral, the soil her altar, the plants her relics, and the air, the same air that moves through basilicas, is her scripture. When the church declared these women witches, it was not for the spells they cast, but for the independence they represented. They were proof that grace could be touched with bare hands, that healing did not need hierarchy, that divinity could live in a blade of grass, and that was intolerable. So the inquisitors came with fire and law. They read from books written by frightened men who mistook power for faith. They asked questions the women could not answer because the questions themselves were wrong. Do you renounce the devil? They asked. But there was no devil in the forest, only wind, only life, only silence listening. The women confessed because confession was survival. But they confessed in code. They said they prayed to Mother Earth. They said they gathered herbs under the moon. They said they spoke to the spirit of water. The priests heard blasphemy. The women meant God. As the church burned their bodies, the seeds they planted sprouted in secret fields. Their daughters learned in whispers. The recipes changed form, but not purpose. The hum of healing continued through time, like roots spreading beneath marble floors. You stand at the edge of the field now. The wind carries voices that are not wind. You hear the rustle of leaves like whispers between centuries. Witch, they called her. But the earth knows better. When the Inquisition finally reached this village, it found only ashes and herbs. The women were gone. The soil, however, glowed faintly where they once stood. No one could explain it. No one dared to touch it. The Vatican wrote it off as superstition. But you, standing here, can feel it. The warmth rising from the ground, as though the fire that once consumed them now lives beneath your feet. They were healers, not heretics. And the earth, not the church, remembers their names. The smell hits you first, sharp, green, alive. You walk through an underground corridor lined with stone jars sealed in wax. Each is labeled in Latin, though the ink has long since faded. This is the Vatican's hidden garden, the Apotheca Obscura. Few know it exists. Fewer dare to enter. You lift a jar from the shelf. The seal cracks with a sound like breath returning to lungs. Inside, a bundle of dried leaves still holds its color. You crush one between your fingers. The scent is unmistakable. Belladonna, deadly nightshade. The church once called it the flower of temptation, but to those who knew its language, it was medicine. You set it down carefully and move to another. Mandrake, the root shaped like the human form. They said it screamed when pulled from the earth, the cry of a soul torn from matter. The monks who heard it went mad, or so the records claim. Yet midwives used it for centuries to ease pain during childbirth. One herb, two meanings. In the hands of a woman, healing. In the mouth of the church, heresy. You light a small candle. Shadows stretch along the walls, flickering over old texts bound in leather. The pages describe plants as demons. Basil said to summon lust, mugwort, illusions, rue, rebellion. You smile. Even now, their fear smells of irony. For centuries, the church controlled what could be known, not just about heaven, but about the body. Pain was divine punishment. Fever was trial by faith. To heal it without permission was to challenge God's order. But witches, the healers, broke that command. They believed God was in the cure itself. In monasteries across Europe, monks copied herbal manuscripts in secret. Some claimed to burn them after. Others hid them. The ones who preserved the knowledge did so under false names, claiming the recipes were from angels, saints, or visions. It was safer to credit a ghost than a woman. You run your hand along one of the shelves. Dust rises like incense. Behind the jars, faint carvings mark the stone, symbols not of the church, but of the old ways. Spirals, circles, the eye of renewal. This place was not built by accident. It was built by those who remembered. The forbidden herbs were more than medicine. They were communication, a dialogue between body and creation. The witches understood that each plant carried not only healing, but consciousness. To use it was not to command it, but to collaborate. That collaboration frightened the church. It blurred the boundary between creator and created. If every leaf had voice, what need was there for intermediaries? What place then for priests? You lift another jar. Inside lies something blackened and strange, fragments of a plant unknown to modern taxonomy. Its label reads, Herba lucis, herb of light. You tilt it under the candle. The pieces glimmer faintly, as if alive. Beneath the Latin, someone has carved smaller words. She sang before she burned. You understand now. The witches' herbs were not only remedies, they were keys, resonant patterns that aligned the body with the pulse of the earth. In burning them, the church was burning frequencies it could not control. Outside, thunder rolls across the night. Rain begins to fall, echoing through the stone vaults. You blow out the candle and step into the corridor. The scent of damp herbs fills the air. Rosemary, sage, mint. Their fragrance is defiant, alive. In the Vatican's own apothecary records, you find entries that contradict their public sermons. Belladonna extract used in small doses to calm hysteria. Mandrake infusion employed in surgical sleep. The same substances condemned in the witch trials were quietly used behind cathedral walls. The church had not feared the herbs. It had feared who controlled them. You think of the women who gathered them at night, guided by the moon and intuition. How they crushed petals with stones, whispered words to water, offered prayers to the wind. Each act was faith made physical. Each act was rebellion. The Vatican called it sin. The earth called it science. You step out into the garden above the vault. It is overgrown now, wild. The statues of saints are covered in ivy. Between the cracks of marble, herbs bloom where they should not. Wormwood, rue, angelica. The forbidden grows freely again. You kneel, touch the soil. It pulses faintly under your palm. Somewhere beneath, roots twist through time, carrying the memory of every burned healer. Their knowledge was never lost. It was buried. And buried things, when ready, bloom again. The rain thickens, falling hard. You close your eyes and let it soak through your hair. For a moment, you feel what they must have felt. Not fear, but belonging. The witches never worshipped darkness. They worshipped connection. To them, every herb was a prayer, every storm a hymn, every wound a teacher. The church tried to silence that song, but even here, within its walls, the melody persists. You can hear it in the rain tapping against the stones, a rhythm older than scripture, gentler than sin. You rise, and the scent of the herbs clings to your hands like memory. You whisper the words carved beneath the jar. She sang before she burned. And you understand now, the song never stopped. It only changed its rhythm, waiting for someone to listen again. You wake beneath a sky pale with mist, the moon still hanging low, a thin blade of light cutting through darkness. You are standing at the edge of a field that hums with life even in silence. Crickets stop when you move. The wind pauses to listen. Something ancient is awake here, something older than scripture, and you can feel it breathing through the grass. The women of this place once called themselves the children of the night's eye. They were healers, astronomers, and midwives, but above all, they were listeners. They watched the moon not for beauty, but for pattern. Its rhythm dictated everything: when to plant, when to harvest, when to heal, when to rest. The Vatican saw only superstition, but to them, It was language. You tilt your head upward. The moon glows cold, deliberate. It moves with an intelligence beyond reason, constant, yet never still. The women once said it was the heart of time itself, beating softly behind the clouds. They learned to read its pulse, not through charts or telescopes, but through bodies, through tides, blood, sleep, and birth. Every cycle of the moon, they whispered, mirrored the human spirit. Growth, fullness, loss, renewal. To them, the divine was circular, not hierarchical. It had no throne. It had gravity. That was what the Vatican could not forgive, because the moon asked for no priest. It required no intermediary. Its light touched everyone equally, sinner and saint, witch and cardinal. In the moon's silver, there was no judgment, only reflection. You saw yourself clearly, and when people began to look inward instead of upward, the church trembled. You walk through the ruins of what was once a convent. The stones shimmer faintly under moonlight. You find symbols etched into the walls, crescents, circles, spirals, maps of lunar cycles hidden behind psalms. Here, the nuns learned to record the phases secretly, disguising astronomical diagrams as embroidery patterns. Each stitch was a code, each thread a verse. One legend speaks of a nun who refused to renounce her lunar faith. She was said to have predicted an eclipse years before astronomers could. The inquisitors accused her of witchcraft. She replied, "I only listened when you would not." They burned her in the square that same night. When the smoke rose, the moon turned red. You run your hand across the wall. The symbols feel warm, almost alive. The air hums faintly, as if the stones still remember being sung to. These women did not simply observe the moon, they harmonized with it. They believed its light tuned the soul, that illness was dissonance and healing was rhythm. They could sense imbalance by touch, by the way the pulse moved under skin. They said, "The body is a tide, the moon its keeper." The church called that blasphemy, because it made the body sacred, not sinful. It taught that creation was not command, but conversation, that the universe listened back. In the dark, you recall how the Malleus Maleficarum spoke of witches drawing down the moon as if it were theft. But what the authors feared was not theft, it was communion. They feared women speaking to the cosmos without permission. The same moon that marked Christ's birth, his death, his resurrection, they claimed for themselves. And in that claim, they erased the need for a church. The Vatican wrote of the moon as a deceiver, a symbol of temptation. But deep within its own archives, hidden under layers of prohibition, are manuscripts acknowledging lunar influence on tides, crops, and human cycles. Knowledge denied in public, preserved in secret. You step outside the ruins. The moon is higher now, bathing the hills in blue light. You close your eyes. The sound of night grows heavy, the pulse of insects, the whisper of wind through cypress trees. You realize the women once stood exactly here, singing in that rhythm, aligning their breath with the sky. They did not summon darkness, they translated it, and you feel it, the difference between fear and understanding. The church feared the moon because it could not own it. The witches loved it because it could not be owned. You open your eyes, and for a moment, you think you see them, faint silhouettes moving between shadows, their hands raised, their mouths open, not in prayer, but in harmony. The moonlight flows through them, through you, through the earth. It is not worship, it is remembrance. And as you stand there, the truth crystallizes like frost on air. They did not call upon the moon to defy God. They called upon it to remember her. The sound comes first, the iron clang of bells echoing through narrow streets. Fear moves faster than reason, and by dawn, it has already taken form. You are in a city built on trembling. Rome, 1486. Smoke drifts above the rooftops. Paper rustles like dry leaves in the hands of monks, copying words that will ignite centuries of terror. The book lies open before them, Malleus Maleficarum, the hammer of witches. The ink is still wet. The script claims to protect the faith, but what it truly protects is control. You step closer. The words seem to breathe. They twist, morph, as if aware of what they will become. The text declares, "A woman is more carnal than a man, more credulous, and thus more easily ensnared by the devil." You feel the cruelty in its rhythm, deliberate, calculated. It is not theology. It is weaponry disguised as prayer. The birth of fear was not a moment. It was a decision. When the church realized it could no longer control knowledge through silence, it began to control it through terror. Fear was faster than faith. Fear could spread without proof. The authors of The Hammer, two Dominican inquisitors, wrote as if possessed not by demons but by obsession. They turned childbirth into proof of evil, healing into heresy, and curiosity into sin. The midwife became the devil's accomplice, the herbalist his bride, the astronomer his priestess. Fear gave the church new power. You walk the corridors of the Vatican at night. Statues glare from their pedestals. You imagine the whispers of priests debating the new decree. Some doubted it quietly, but they feared doubt itself. The text told them what to believe. She is to be feared, for through her the devil works his will. Outside, fear grew like mold. Villagers turned on each other. Neighbors whispered names. The Inquisition spread faster than plague. A woman who owned a cat, accused. A woman who collected rainwater, accused. A woman who sang to her newborn child, accused. You pass through a chamber lined with parchment. Lists upon lists. The ink is brown now, but the names remain endless. Each one is followed by a single word, condemned. And for what? For knowledge, for calmness, for daring to exist without permission. The birth of fear reshaped the world. It taught humanity to distrust itself, to see wisdom as rebellion, to see woman as danger. The church preached that the devil entered through curiosity, but curiosity was the first form of worship, the desire to understand creation. They rewrote that desire into sin, making ignorance a virtue. And the more the people feared knowledge, the more they depended on those who claimed to hold it. That was the genius of fear. It created obedience. In one letter preserved in the archives, a cardinal writes, "We have turned the fear of hell into the cement of faith." He was not ashamed. He was proud. You leave the chamber and step into the courtyard. The night air tastes of rain and iron. The bells ring again, announcing dawn, though it feels like darkness rising. You see the pattern now, each century built upon the previous lie. Fear of the devil became fear of women. Fear of women became fear of freedom. Fear of freedom became the foundation of faith. You walk past a fountain where angels pour water from marble urns. Their faces are serene, but their eyes seem to mourn. Beneath the stone, you hear the faintest echo, the low hum of all the voices silenced by fear. It's not anger, it's memory. The church taught that the devil was the enemy of God, but the truth is simpler, sharper. The devil was the name given to anything they could not own. You kneel beside the water, looking at your reflection. The moon glimmers in it faintly, still watching. Fear has tried to bury her for centuries, yet she remains. You whisper to the reflection, "What were you so afraid of?" The answer comes not as words, but as wind through stone, that you would remember. You rise, and the bells fall silent. Somewhere deep below, the ink of the Malleus Maleficarum continues to bleed through time, staining belief itself. But the night feels lighter now. The moon glows full again. Fear built an empire, but memory, patient, luminous, unyielding, is beginning to reclaim it. You stand in a small room lit by one trembling candle. The flame bends as if afraid to be seen. A heavy book lies open on the table before you, its pages thick, its ink dark as blood. The words crawl across the parchment like living things. Malleus Maleficarum, the hammer of witches. You can almost hear the quills scratching, the breath of the monks copying its poison word for word. They believed they were preserving truth, but what they preserved was fear, bound in leather, sealed in doctrine, whispered in every pulpit across Europe. The year is 1487. The ink has barely dried, and yet the fire has already begun. You read the lines aloud. They sound like judgment pretending to be wisdom. Every woman who acts without submission to man is suspect of sorcery. Her touch corrupts, her speech deceives, her womb bears danger. She must be questioned by water, by pain, by fire, for the sake of her soul. The words do not ask for belief. They demand obedience. You close the book and look around the room. The walls are covered in parchment, sketches of women bound, lists of names, diagrams of torture devices drawn like sacred instruments. In the corner, a priest prays. His lips move, but his eyes are open, fixed on the flame. You realize he is not praying for mercy. He is praying for certainty. The Malleus Maleficarum gave men what they desired most: permission. It was a theology of control disguised as protection. The witches they hunted were not strangers. They were neighbors, healers, wives, midwives, mothers. But the hammer taught them to see her differently, not as woman, but as gateway, a passage to something forbidden. The fire was born not from hatred, but from fear, pretending to be holiness. You walk outside into the courtyard. The air smells of smoke. A crowd gathers around a wooden platform. A woman stands upon it, her hands bound, her hair catching the wind like black silk. The priest raises the book above his head and speaks the words you have just read. His voice trembles with conviction. The people repeat after him, their fear made chorus. The woman does not speak. Her eyes find yours in the crowd. For a moment, the world falls silent. You realize then that she is not afraid of death. She is afraid of being forgotten. The torch touches the wood. The first spark leaps upward. The fire climbs fast, hungry, alive. The crowd cheers, but you hear something else beneath it. A hum, low and steady. It is her voice, singing through the flame. The priests claim it is the devil's cry. But you know better. It is the sound of truth refusing to die. The Malleus did not just kill bodies. It killed memory. It turned faith into machinery. Each question, each accusation, each confession, a cog in a system of fear. The Inquisition became industry. The fire became currency. The church no longer needed proof. It needed ritual. Inside monasteries, copies of the book multiplied like infection. Priests read from it during Mass. Judges cited it in court. It became Scripture's darker twin, the gospel of control. And for 300 years, its shadow fell across every village in Europe. You walk now through the echo of those centuries. Every church bell, every sermon, every confession carries traces of that text. Its rhythm lingers. Guilt as obedience, obedience as faith. But the hammer had a flaw. It never imagined the possibility of survival. The witches did not vanish. Their stories sank underground. Their chants turned to lullabies. Their herbs disguised as kitchen spices. Their prayers hidden inside songs about harvest, moonlight, and rain. Every time a woman whispered healing words to a sick child, she broke the hammer's spell. Every time she taught her daughter which herbs soothed fever, the fire lost a little of its hunger. And you, standing here centuries later, are proof that the hammer failed. Because you are still listening. You are still walking through their ashes, and the earth still hums beneath your feet. The fire thought it had consumed them, but it only made their truth visible in smoke. You close your eyes. The candle's flame flickers again, small, trembling, but alive. The hammer wanted silence. The flame remembers the sound, and in that sound you hear them still, not crying, not screaming, but singing the one song the church could never extinguish. You can burn the body, but not the breath. You are in a stone chamber beneath the cathedral. The air is thick, unmoving. A single lantern swings from the ceiling. Its light, weak, yellow, dying. You hear footsteps above, the murmurs of priests, the distant toll of bells. Down here, the world smells of fear. A wooden chair stands in the center of the room. Its legs are stained darker than the rest of the floor. Beside it, a table holds a quill, a bowl of water, a crucifix, and a book bound in black leather. You already know its name. The Inquisitor enters. He carries silence like a weapon. His face is pale, his eyes small and cold. He sits across from the woman bound to the chair. Her dress is torn, her hands tied with rope. Her hair hangs in front of her face like a veil. He begins to ask questions. His voice is calm, rehearsed. Do you confess to speaking with the devil? She does not answer. Do you confess to flying by night? Silence. To causing storms? To poisoning crops? Still silence. He sighs and turns to the assistant. The water is poured into the bowl. The crucifix glints. The ritual begins. You stand at the edge of the room, invisible, watching. You want to speak, to stop it, but you know this is only memory now. It has already happened. The Inquisitor dips the quill. He writes the word non responde. She does not answer. He repeats it after every question. The ink forms a rhythm, slow and merciless. Each silence is proof, each refusal a confession. The trial of silence was never about truth. It was about endurance. How long a woman could remain herself before the pain erased her. The first stage was persuasion. The second, purification. The third, revelation. You see the assistant move behind her, whispering prayers under his breath. The Inquisitor raises his hand, signaling for the questioning to continue. His tone sharpens. You refuse to speak, therefore you are guilty. The logic folds in on itself. Silence becomes her crime. You watch her lift her head slowly. Her eyes find the Inquisitor's. She does not beg. She does not cry. She simply looks at him with a calm that unnerves the entire room. You are wrong, she says softly. Her voice cracks from thirst, but it holds weight. It is not silence you hear. It is your own fear echoing back. The Inquisitor freezes. For a heartbeat, even the candle stops flickering. He orders her bound tighter. The assistant obeys. The night stretches endlessly. Hours pass. The questions repeat, reshaped but hollow. Each time she answers the same, with silence or with a sentence too simple to be condemned. I healed her. I prayed. I listened. But the Inquisitor cannot write those words. They do not fit his theology. He replaces them with others. She confessed to sorcery. This was the final cruelty of the trial of silence. It did not seek truth, only record the illusion of it. Every document, every confession, every testimony was rewritten until it fit the church's reflection of itself. The silence of the accused became the voice of the accuser. You look at her again. Her breathing is slow now. Her hands tremble. She is fading, but not defeated. You sense something strange. The air begins to hum faintly. It grows louder, a vibration in the stones, in the lantern, in your own chest. The Inquisitor hears it too. He frowns. What is that sound? The assistant panics, spilling water across the floor. The lantern sways, light scattering against the walls. The woman closes her eyes and whispers something you cannot fully hear. It sounds like wind moving through leaves. The inquisitor shouts, demanding silence, but the sound grows louder. It is not voice, not chant, but resonance, the kind the earth makes before a storm. The hum becomes unbearable, filling the chamber with vibration. The crucifix on the table trembles, falls. The water ripples. Then, stillness. The woman opens her eyes. "Now you hear what you burned," she says. Later, they will say she confessed. They will write that she called upon demons, that the earth shook at her command. They will forget the hum. They will forget the truth. But sound does not die. Years later, when the chamber is empty, monks will report strange echoes in the floor, a low vibration that fades when prayers begin. Some call it haunting, others call it memory. You stand alone now. The inquisitor's chair is gone. The walls are damp, covered in moss. The silence remains, but it is different now. Not absence, presence, a silence that listens. The trial of silence never ended. It only changed form. Every time truth is twisted into confession, it returns. Every time authority demands obedience disguised as salvation, the chamber opens again. You place your hand on the cold stone wall. The hum returns. Faint but steady. The same note as before. The same defiance. The woman never stopped speaking. She only changed her language. And now, through you, her silence begins to sound again. You are standing in a chapel where light falls like confession itself, fractured, trembling, unsure. The walls smell of incense and cold stone. Rows of pews stretch before you, empty, except for the faint impression of bodies long gone. Above the altar hangs a crucifix, its eyes carved too wide, as if even Christ cannot bear to watch what happens here. The priests called themselves confessors. They believed they were saving souls, but they were not listening to sin. They were listening for control. In the beginning, confession was mercy, a chance to speak, to unburden, to be heard. But when fear became faith's language, confession turned into theatre, and the confessor became the playwright. He wrote guilt into every silence, every pause, every hesitation of breath. You can still hear them if you listen. Their whispers live in the walls. Tell me everything. Leave nothing hidden. The devil works in secrets. The women came trembling, clutching rosaries, clutching the hope that mercy was real. But behind the carved lattice of the confessional, the priest was not searching for truth. He was manufacturing it. Every tear was proof. Every hesitation became guilt. The devil did not have to appear. The church would write him into being. You kneel where they once knelt. The wood creaks beneath you, old and knowing. You imagine the scene, a dim booth, the smell of wax and breath, a woman whispering about herbs, dreams, childbirth, ordinary things. But the confessor's ear twists them. You claim you healed a fever, then you have stolen God's miracle. In that booth, theology and fear were indistinguishable. The confessor's voice was trained to sound like mercy, but it was design. Each question led to another, each answer reshaped to fit the narrative of possession. Did you speak words not found in prayer? Did you sense a presence when you worked? Did you enjoy the feeling of power? The confession was already written before she entered. You can still sense their presence. The confessors who believed they were soldiers of heaven, not realizing they had become architects of hell. Some were true believers. Others were frightened men hiding behind doctrine. But all of them served the same hunger, the need to name, to classify, to divide the pure from the impure. One confession record still survives in the Vatican archive. It reads, "She wept when asked if she saw visions. She claimed they came from light, not shadow. She said the voice told her to heal, not to harm. We advised her that no light speaks without permission of Christ. She was sentenced to cleansing. cleansing, their gentle word for fire. You wonder how many believed they were doing good, how many thought the flames were purifying, not killing. There is a terrible comfort in righteousness. It blinds the hand holding the torch. The confessor's gospel spread faster than any scripture. It became the heartbeat of the Inquisition, the idea that salvation required surveillance. That truth could only exist when it was recorded, that every soul was safer when watched. And so, confession became not the forgiveness of sin, but the creation of it. Even now you can feel it, that inheritance. The instinct to apologize for existing, to confess before even being accused, to fear the quiet voice within that asks too many questions. The church taught that the devil tempted humanity with pride. But pride was never the danger. It was silence, the kind that makes you forget your own worth until someone else defines it for you. You move to the altar. A single candle burns there, its wax pooling into shapes like faces melting from memory. You touch the cold marble. The hum that followed you through other chapters is here too, softer, reverent, like a pulse behind the walls. The confessors wrote that their mission was to separate the sheep from the wolves, but they forgot that the shepherd's knife cuts both. You look up at the crucifix again. The figure on it seems to have changed. The eyes are closed now, not in agony, but in exhaustion, as if even God grew tired of hearing his name used for control. And then you understand. Confession was never about the devil at all. It was about keeping the world small enough to fit between two hands, one holding power, the other holding guilt. You whisper into the empty air, "I confess nothing." The candle flickers. The hum grows stronger. The chapel exhales. For the first time in centuries, silence feels holy again. You wake in a field of wild poppies. The air smells of smoke and milk, like birth and burial intertwined. The horizon glows red, not from dawn, but from memory. You are walking across centuries now, through villages that no longer exist, toward women who once carried the world in their hands. They were called levatrices, sages femmes, hebamen, madri delle anime, midwives. But history renamed them witches. You see them moving through narrow streets at night, carrying baskets filled with linen, herbs, small knives, bits of silver. They were called not by title, but by whisper, summoned in the hour when faith met flesh. They entered homes where priests would not go. They touched the sacred without fear. They stood at the edge of life and death and did not flinch. They were the first witnesses of creation, and for that, the church made them enemies. Because every birth they attended reminded people of something the Vatican tried to erase, that divinity was not only born in temples, but in women. That holiness began with pain, blood, and breath. That God's first miracle did not come from thunder, it came from a mother's cry. The midwives knew what the priests could not bear. That creation was not command, but cooperation. That the body was not cursed, but consecrated. You follow one now, an old woman with grey hair and a lantern. She walks through fog toward a cottage where a woman labours. Inside, the air is thick with heat and fear. The husband prays in the corner, whispering Latin words he does not understand. The midwife ignores him. She kneels by the woman's side, places her hand on her belly, and listens. Not to the heartbeat, to the rhythm of the world within her. She hums softly, a sound that blends with the wind outside. The child is born in silence, wrapped in cloth. The midwife smiles, her eyes reflecting candlelight. She does not look upward. She looks at the mother. In that moment, faith and flesh are the same thing, but the church could not allow that. When the Inquisition rose, it came first for the midwives. Papal decrees declared that any woman assisting in birth without ecclesiastical approval was suspect. Healing herbs became instruments of sorcery. Whispered prayers became invocations. Even the act of touching a newborn before a priest could baptize it was labeled heresy. The midwives were dragged from their homes, their tools confiscated, their names erased. Yet their craft lived on, hidden in kitchens, disguised as superstition. Recipes for childbirth were written inside cookbooks, remedies for fever disguised as soup. The language of survival was coded into the ordinary. You find one of their journals buried in the soil of time, water-stained, fragile. Inside, drawings of hands, plants, moons, words written sideways, as if to confuse the uninitiated. Beside each herb, a phrase, for courage, for blood made stubborn, for breath that forgets itself. You read a line near the end. They call us witches, but we only bring forth what heaven has already planted. The page smells faintly of smoke. You imagine the day they came for her, the sound of boots on wood, the tearing of cloth, the questions shouted louder than her answers, the child she delivered the night before now sleeping in another room, the husband standing helpless, too afraid to speak. They called it a trial, but it was a ritual, the purification of power they could not understand. When she died, they said she confessed. They wrote that she cursed her own hands. But the truth is quieter. She whispered a prayer for the next woman who would carry her work forward. And she did. Across Europe, the knowledge spread underground. In forests, women gathered at night to exchange herbs, to teach what the church had forbidden. They hid their learning in lullabies and field songs. They marked safe houses with carved crescents in door frames, invisible to priests, obvious to those who knew. The Inquisition's flames could not reach the soil. The soil remembered everything. You walk farther into the field of poppies. Each flower seems to pulse faintly with warmth. You kneel and dig your hand into the dirt. Beneath the roots, you find small fragments, bits of glass, copper, bone. The tools of the midwives. They were meant to be buried as evidence of guilt. Instead, they became relics of resistance. You lift a small bronze ring, its surface etched with the symbol of the moon. It hums faintly in your palm. The same hum you've heard before, the resonance of remembrance. You realize then that the lost midwives of Europe were never lost. They became the memory within the body of the world. Every healer who trusts her instinct, every doctor who listens to her patient, every mother who believes her body knows, they are still here. The church feared witches more than the devil, because witches gave birth to miracles without permission. They proved that divine power could move through hands, through blood, through pain, through women. And that truth, once spoken, could never again be confined to scripture. You stand, holding the ring to the sky. The wind moves through the poppies like breath. You hear the faint sound of a heartbeat, the rhythm of all who came before. Somewhere beneath the soil, their whispers continue. Not curses, blessings, not cries of fear, songs of return. And as the sun rises over the field, it feels less like mourning and more like resurrection. You walk beneath a cathedral older than reason, where the candles burn too slow and the air smells of myrrh and secrecy. The marble glows faintly in the dimness, but under your feet you feel another kind of rhythm, something pulsing beneath the stone. You follow it, down a narrow stair, past mosaics of saints whose eyes follow your every move. The stair ends in darkness. The hum grows louder. There is a door here, wooden, carved with symbols half hidden by centuries of varnish. You trace them with your fingers. Crescent, spiral, flame. Not Christian. Older. You push the door open. The room beyond is circular. Its walls are not painted, but engraved. Every inch covered in lines, marks, constellations. A code of prayer that no one above would understand. At the center stands an altar of black stone. On it rests a simple iron cross. You are in a secret chapel, the circle beneath the cross. It was here that faith split in two. The nuns who worshipped in this place served both heaven and earth. By day, they followed the church's rhythm, bells, chants, obedience. But by night, They gathered here, where no confessor could hear, and they prayed in another tongue, a language that spoke not of sin, but of balance, not of obedience, but of remembrance. Their prayers began not with Our Father, but with Mother of Roots, Keeper of Light. Their psalms were hymns to the moon, to the rivers, to the pulse of the soil. They believed divinity was circular, not throne and subject, but cycle and return. They were called sisters by day. By night, they were something else, the silent ones, the keepers of the hidden fire. You move closer to the altar. Its surface is smooth, but the cross upon it is not made for worship. It is hollow. You lift it and find a cavity beneath, a hidden compartment lined with parchment. Inside, drawings, diagrams of stars, cycles of the moon, the geometry of seeds. One page shows the cross overlaid with a circle. The caption reads, "Where heaven descends, earth ascends." The circle and the cross. Two faiths joined by necessity, divided by fear. The church believed in distance, God above, man below. The women of this place believed in merging, that light needed shadow, that God and matter were not enemies, but mirrors. That idea was enough to damn them. When the Inquisition began searching monasteries, they found no witches in forests. They found them in convents. Women who had read too deeply, sung too freely, questioned too softly. The ones who had mapped the stars instead of reciting rote prayers. They called them the Sisterhood of the Circle. You can almost hear their chants now, low, resonant, carried through time like the breath of a buried ocean. God sleeps in stone, dreams in plant, wakes in animal, remembers in man. It is a hymn to unity, one that the church declared heresy. The sisters were interrogated, accused of invoking forbidden forces. Some confessed, some vanished, but a few remained here, in this chamber beneath the cathedral, where they continued their worship in silence. One of their letters survives, sealed in wax. We do not serve two masters. We serve the same truth, seen from both sides. You touch the wall. It's warm, faintly vibrating, as if the chant still lives within it. You understand now. The circle beneath the cross was not rebellion. It was restoration, the attempt to reconcile what the church had divided, body and spirit, woman and God, heaven and soil. The sisters did not deny Christ. They simply refused to forget Mary. You close the hollow cross and place it back on the altar. The hum softens, like a breath released. When you climb the stairs again, the marble seems brighter. The air smells faintly of herbs, sage, rosemary, perhaps lavender, the kind of scent that doesn't belong in stone, but in soil. You realize the circle still exists, not in secret rooms, but in the quiet spaces between prayers, in the hearts of those who remember that divinity was never meant to be owned. Above the cathedral, the bells begin to ring. Below, the circle hums again, soft, eternal, alive. You are deep beneath the Vatican now. The air is thick with dust and heat. The corridors twist like veins through the earth, leading to a place few have ever seen. You pass through iron doors marked Archivum Prohibitum, the forbidden archives. The light grows dim. The smell changes, not of parchment, but of ash. You have reached the Library of Cinders. It is vast, hollow, and alive with silence. Shelves stretch endlessly, filled not with books, but with urns. Each urn bears a name and a date, or sometimes no name at all. You lift one gently. Inside, not ashes of the dead, but ashes of books, burned manuscripts, charred fragments of forbidden knowledge. The Vatican never destroyed ideas completely. It archived them, it caged them, it called the act preservation, the mercy of control. You open one urn, the air tastes of smoke and salt. Inside, a sliver of parchment, blackened but legible. The writing is in Greek. The blood of the mother is the first baptism, a heresy and a truth too human for heaven. You move deeper. The heat rises. Some say the Library of Cinders was built directly above a vent of volcanic fire, a natural furnace meant to remind those who entered what disobedience cost. Others say it was built deliberately, so the smoke would rise through cracks in the basilica above. So every mass, every sermon, would be faintly perfumed with the scent of burning memory. The irony is unbearable. You pause beside a massive iron table. Upon it, half-burned pages lie arranged like relics. You pick one up. It trembles in your hands, as if alive. The text describes the herbology of creation, how certain plants, when crushed under moonlight, reveal invisible script upon their leaves. It is a gospel of the earth, unsigned, unclaimed. A priest once wrote in the margin, "If these words breathe again, the church will drown in its own smoke." You breathe on the page. For a moment, faint letters appear, glowing red like embers. You cannot burn what breathes. Then they fade. You move on. Each urn you pass hums faintly, as if remembering the sound of fire. The titles etched into their lids tell a hidden history. On the sanctity of birth, of the healing flame. Codex Lunaria, the mirror of Eve. These were not books of demons, they were manuals of freedom. Theologies written by women who dared to see God in creation, not beyond it. You reach the far end of the hall. A massive furnace stands here, cold now, its iron mouth sealed. Above it, a plaque reads, "Here ended the false scriptures." You touch the metal. It is still warm. Suddenly, you realize the library is not dead. It feeds on remembrance. The ashes are not remains. They are seeds. You kneel and press your ear to the ground. Beneath the stone, you hear it, faint, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. The same hum that has followed you since the beginning. The pulse of what was burned, still alive, still remembering. For centuries, the church used fire as language. To burn was to declare victory. But every flame is also illumination. Every ember carries memory. The witches' ashes fell into rivers, into fields, into soil, and from them new roots grew. You take a handful of ash from one urn and hold it up to the light. It glitters faintly, like dust from stars. You blow on it, and it swirls into the air. Not smoke, but breath. Somewhere above, a bell rings. The sound descends through the earth, resonating through the shelves. The urns tremble. Ash spills onto the floor like snow. The air hums louder now, rising into chant. You realize that you are not alone. Shadows move among the shelves. Shapes of women, faint as memory, their faces soft with firelight. They move like wind, touching each urn, whispering names you cannot hear. You understand. They are not ghosts. They are memory made visible. They look at you, not accusingly, but with recognition. One reaches out, touches your hand. Her touch is warm. Her voice, when she speaks, is the sound of flame turning to breath. "They thought they ended us," she says, "but they only changed our form." You ask her, "Where did you go?" She smiles. "Everywhere they burned us." The air fills with light, not firelight, but something gentler, golden. The urns glow, each one like a lantern awakening. The ashes shimmer, rising slowly, swirling upward toward the cracks in the ceiling. You follow them with your eyes. The light seeps through stone, through marble, through centuries of silence, reaching the surface, the world above. And there, though you cannot see it, someone will feel it. A sudden warmth, a shiver in the air, a scent of smoke that smells not of destruction, but of awakening. The Library of Cinders exhales. The ashes settle back into stillness. The hum quiets, but it never disappears. It waits, patient, eternal, alive. You walk back toward the stair, your hands dusted with grey light. The air behind you glows faintly in rhythm with your heartbeat. You know now what the church feared most, It was not witches, it was continuity, because nothing truly burns when it is remembered. You are standing in the courtyard of a monastery where time has folded over itself. The air is cool, yet carries the faint scent of iron, sharp, metallic, unmistakable. The bell above you swings in slow rhythm, though no rope moves it. Its tolls echo through the stones like the beating of a heart that refuses to stop. Each sound is a memory, each vibration a confession. This was where the priests came to purify the accused, not through prayer, but through blood. They believed pain could reveal truth, that suffering could summon divinity. The Malleus Maleficarum called it purificatio per tormentum, the cleansing through torment. They said it saved the soul by breaking the body. You walk toward the center of the courtyard. The stones beneath your feet are darkened, as if they absorbed what the sky could not bear to see. At the center stands a circular platform, carved with sigils the church pretended not to know. Some were crosses, others were older, curved into shapes of moons and spirals, remnants of faiths that refused to die. It was here, beneath the tolling of the great bronze bell, that the rituals of blood and absolution began. You hear them even now, voices chanting in Latin, rhythmic and cold. You see the priests forming a circle, their robes brushing the stone. In the middle kneels a woman, her wrists bound, her eyes lifted not to heaven, but to the sound of the bell. One priest reads from a book, another holds a bowl of water, a third stands ready with the instrument of purification. They ask her to confess. She does not speak. The bell tolls again, deep, resonant, final. The sound rolls through her bones, through yours, through centuries. The priests believe the vibration drives out demons. They do not see what it truly does. It carries her voice forward, into the future. Each toll, a fragment of resistance disguised as echo. You close your eyes. The bell's sound fills you. Beneath its tone, another note hums. Faint, feminine, steady. A counterpoint. You realize the bell is not alone. Something beneath it sings back. When the ritual ends, the priests wipe the blood from the stone and call it grace. They record her death as salvation. The bell tolls once more, sealing her silence into history. But the echo does not stop. It travels through the air, through soil, through water, through time. It becomes thunder, then whisper, then heartbeat. And somewhere, centuries later, when another woman dares to speak her truth, that same note stirs beneath her voice. The bell's song never belonged to the church. It belonged to her. You walk beneath it now, looking up. Its bronze surface is cracked with age, but if you look closely, you see faint markings etched into the metal. Names. Thousands of them. The names of those purified by fire, water, confession, or silence. Names the church recorded as lost. Names the earth recorded as seeds. You touch the bell. It is warm. The hum returns. You feel the pulse of every name vibrating under your hand. It strikes again. The sound fills your chest. And for an instant, you understand what the priests could not, that the line between prayer and scream is thinner than air. The blood and the bell were never about faith. They were about control disguised as mercy. The church sought to make fear sound holy, but sound cannot lie. When the bell tolled for the dead, it did not mourn them. It remembered them. You walk away, leaving your palm print in dust on its surface. Somewhere in the distance, another bell begins to ring. It answers the first, a harmony long delayed, finally heard. And the echo, once used to sanctify death, now sanctifies memory. You wake in a hall of mirrors, not glass, but polished obsidian. Each wall reflects not your face, but others, thousands of them, flickering like candlelight through smoke. Some are women, some are men. All are distorted, their features shifting between pain and reverence, between saint and sinner. This is the devil's mirror, a room not of reflection, but revelation. It was here, deep within the Vatican's secret chambers, that the inquisitors came to confront what they called the forma diaboli, the shape of the devil. They believed the mirror could reveal corruption within the soul. They stood before it, clutching their rosaries, asking to see evil made visible. And they did. But it was not the devil they saw. It was themselves. The mirror did not show horns or fire. It showed desire, the kind too human to confess, the kind that frightened men who had built their lives on the illusion of purity. They looked into the black glass and saw their own hunger, their envy, their cruelty reflected back. And rather than face it, they named it demon. You walk closer. The air here is heavy, thick with centuries of breath. The surface of the mirror ripples as if alive. You see yourself for a moment. Then the image changes. You see a man in robes, eyes hollow with fasting, lips whispering prayers he no longer believes. His reflection twists, and behind him appears the faint outline of a woman, luminous, calm, unburned. The man turns in fear. The woman remains. Her reflection does not fade. She is not demon. She is memory. The inquisitors wrote that the mirror tempted them, that it made them see beauty in forbidden things. They claimed it whispered. They claimed it smiled. Some shattered it in terror, but every shard reflected the same truth. The devil was not in the reflection. He was in the denial of it. For centuries, the church preached that sin came from without, but the mirror knew otherwise. The true corruption was not in women who healed or dreamed or bled. It was in men who could not accept their own darkness without casting it onto someone else. You reach out and touch the obsidian. It is cold, yet it vibrates faintly under your fingertips. You see scenes within it, flashes of pyres, trials, ink-stained fingers writing lies. Between each image, the same face returns. The witch, the midwife, the healer. Her gaze is steady, her silence unbearable. You whisper, "Who are you?" The reflection answers in your own voice, "I am what they feared." The sound ripples through the glass. Each reflection trembles, fractures, reforms. You see now what the devil's mirror truly was. Not a relic of superstition, but a test of power. Whoever stood before it faced their shadow. Those who accepted it walked away unchanged. Those who denied it began the Inquisition. The first inquisitor to use it, Brother Henricus, wrote that the mirror revealed the corruption of womanhood. His notes describe visions of serpents, of red moons, of laughter echoing in the dark. But another priest, years later, confessed privately that the serpents were his own desire. The laughter was his guilt. The mirror had shown him not witchcraft, but humanity. The church sealed the mirror in a vault after that. It was too dangerous, not because it was evil, but because it was honest. You stare deeper into it now. The obsidian begins to clear. You see yourself again. But this time, there are two of you. The one that believes and the one that doubts. The one that kneels and the one that stands. They look at each other, unafraid. Slowly, they merge. You feel warmth spread through your chest. The hum returns, low, endless, alive. The mirror begins to glow faintly, reflecting not faces, but light. Thousands of small flames flicker within its surface. Each one, a soul once condemned, now visible. The devil's mirror was never a portal to darkness. It was a window to truth. It showed that holiness and heresy were twins, born from the same fire, divided only by who was allowed to speak. You turn away, but the light follows you. It spills onto the floor, tracing a path that leads back to the world above. As you ascend the stairs, you understand what the inquisitors never did. To see yourself clearly is to dissolve the need for enemies. The church built its empire upon reflection, denied. The witches built their legacy upon reflection, embraced. And now, standing in the open air once more. You realize the truth they feared most, that the devil's mirror was never the enemy's tool. It was humanity's conscience, and it is beginning to shine again. You wake to the sound of a quill scratching parchment, a slow, deliberate rhythm that sounds more like machinery than writing. The room is filled with candle smoke, thick and heavy, curling through beams of pale morning light. Monks sit in rows, copying the same words over and over. You can smell ink, oil, and fear. This is where control was born. Not in fire, not in sermons, but in repetition. Each stroke of ink builds a cage. Each copied sentence becomes another wall. The monks do not write scripture, they write obedience. On the tables before them lie the new commandments of order, papal decrees, rules of confession, formulas for sin. The handwriting is elegant, merciless. Fear not God, fear disobedience. The church learned early that fear alone was not enough. Fear burned bright, but brief. It needed structure, a rhythm that could hum beneath consciousness, whispering, kneel, confess, comply. You walk between the tables. The monks do not see you. Their eyes are glassy, their movements mechanical. Their lips move silently, copying words even when their quills pause. It is not faith driving them, it is conditioning. The birth of control began when faith was replaced by systems, when prayer became protocol, when the divine became an institution. The Vatican realized that chaos was not the enemy, freedom was. So it created the illusion of order. You find one of the manuscripts left open. The ink is still wet. The page reads, "To protect the soul, the mind must be bound." You touch the words. The ink smears under your fingers like blood. Above the scriptorium, bells ring. 3 tones, precise, unchanging. Each bell signals an hour. Each hour signals a prayer. Each prayer signals a life reduced to obedience. That is how control breathes. Through rhythm, through repetition, through predictability disguised as holiness. In another hall, priests debate theology. Their robes shimmer with gold thread. But their voices are not arguments, they are rehearsals. Each phrase begins with certainty and ends with warning. Every doubt is reshaped into doctrine. Obedience is love, one says. Doubt is rebellion, answers another. They believe they are building faith. They are building architecture. You step outside into the courtyard. The sunlight blinds you for a moment. But even here, control extends its fingers. The layout of the monastery is geometric, deliberate, symmetry as theology. The garden paths form a cross. The fountains divide space into quadrants. Every corner reinforces hierarchy. Altar above, servant below. You see it now. The design was never about beauty. It was about containment. The birth of control was not an act of violence. It was an act of refinement. The church learned to shape behavior as architects shape space, through designs so invisible it feels natural. And beneath it all, the whisper persisted. This is for your salvation. The inquisitors, the confessors, the scribes, all became gears in a machine that called itself faith. Each one believed they served something holy, but holiness had long been replaced by maintenance. Maintenance of order, of fear, of silence. You remember the witches, the healers, the midwives. They too had their rhythm, but theirs followed the body, the moon, the breath. The church replaced that with schedules, calendars, bells. It took the natural pulse of life and mechanized it. Control works best when it feels sacred. As night falls, you walk through the cathedral. Its grandeur is almost unbearable. Columns rise like ribs, holding the body of God in place. The floor is marble, smooth, cold, unyielding. You hear footsteps echo behind you, but when you turn, no one is there. You look up at the painted ceiling. Angels hover above clouds, but their wings are rigid, symmetrical. Even heaven, it seems, must obey geometry. Control had become creation. At the heart of the cathedral stands a single pulpit carved from dark wood. You climb its steps. On its surface, carved in Latin, are the words, "He who commands fear, commands faith." You trace the letters with your fingers, and beneath the wood, you feel the hum again. Faint, rhythmic, familiar. The same hum that lived in the witch's soil, the midwife's herbs, the fire's ashes. Control can shape bodies, but it cannot silence resonance. You close your eyes and listen. The hum grows louder, not from below, but from within. And you realize, every system built to suppress the divine only strengthens it. The birth of control was the beginning of decline, because nothing that seeks to own light can survive it. You descend from the pulpit, leaving footprints in the dust. The bells ring again, distant, measured, perfect. But in their rhythm, you hear something new, a fracture, a skipped beat, a sign that the machine is beginning to falter. And beneath that, almost hidden, another rhythm rises, slow, organic, unstoppable. The return of something older than order. You walk through a hallway of sealed doors. Behind each one lies something the church has forbidden to exist. At the end stands a single doorway covered in gold leaf, unmarked, silent. The lock is shaped like a serpent swallowing its own tail. You touch it. It clicks open. The room beyond is not what you expect. It is small, dim, filled with dust and petals. A single book rests upon a marble pedestal, its cover plain, its pages glowing faintly with age. You approach it slowly. This is the Gospel of Mary, not the version whispered in apocryphal corners, the real one, the one never meant to be read. You open the first page. The writing is soft, curved, unlike the harsh Latin of the Vatican texts. It flows like water, like conversation. In the beginning was not command, but compassion. You read on. The words speak of creation not as decree, but as birth. Of divinity not as hierarchy, but as memory. Of salvation not through sacrifice, but through recognition. Of self, of others, of the world, as one body breathing. Mary writes of a Christ who teaches not authority, but awakening. Of a God who resides not in heaven, but in every act of love. The more you read, the clearer it becomes. This gospel was not rejected for blasphemy. It was rejected for liberation. It speaks of women not as vessels, but as voices. It describes wisdom as feminine, not submissive, but luminous. It says, "To know yourself is to know the kingdom." You imagine the panic it must have caused. A church built upon obedience cannot survive a faith built upon recognition. You turn another page. The ink shimmers faintly, though the light here never changes. You realize the book was written in a mixture of languages, Aramaic, Coptic, fragments of something older, perhaps pre-Hebrew. It reads like dream language, the kind that slips between symbols and memory. You read, "They will say the Word became flesh, but flesh was already the Word." You understand why this text was buried. It erased the need for mediation. It made every believer their own priest, every act of compassion a liturgy. It made the divine accessible, human, immediate. The church could not allow that. And so, it turned Mary into myth. A mother, a statue, a symbol of obedience. But never again a voice. You hear footsteps behind you. You turn, but no one stands there. Only the flicker of candlelight against the wall. A whisper follows. Soft and familiar. "Do not fear what remembers." You look back at the gospel. The pages are turning themselves now, slowly, like breath. The words rearrange, glowing brighter. You see visions between the lines. A desert, a child, a river of light. You hear laughter, not divine, but human. You feel warmth spread through your chest, and for a moment, you are inside the story, not reading it. Mary's voice fills the room. It is not gentle. It is certain. The church was built to preserve the word, but the word was never meant to be preserved. It was meant to live. The room begins to hum, the same sound that followed you through the fire, the herbs, the ashes, the hum of continuity, of resistance, of creation. You close the book, trembling. The air glows faintly, as if illuminated from within. On the cover, a symbol you hadn't noticed before appears. A circle within a cross. The mark of the hidden faith. You understand now. The Gospel of Mary was never truly lost. It survived in fragments, in rituals, in whispers passed from mother to daughter, from healer to midwife, from dream to waking. It lived wherever compassion refused to die. The church feared it, not because it contradicted scripture, but because it completed it. It told the story that the other gospels could not, that creation is still happening, that every act of love is Genesis again. You kneel, not in worship, but in awe. The air around you vibrates with life. The hum grows louder until it fills the room like a living heartbeat. And in that sound you hear it, her voice, clear, unbroken. You are not the sinner. You are the continuation. You leave the room. The lock closes behind you, but the sound follows, faint, eternal. Somewhere above, the bells of the Vatican toll. But this time, they do not sound like control. They sound like awakening. You enter a city built from scripture and symmetry. The streets unfold like verses. The walls rise in rhythm. The air smells of lime dust and old faith. You walk between pillars carved into perfection, and everywhere you look, the same pattern repeats. The cross, the circle, the triangle. Every angle whispers of order. Every shadow hides what was erased. This was not a city born from prayer. It was built from fear of imperfection. You walk past the facade of a basilica. Its stones shimmer faintly in the fading light, but behind that beauty lies a quiet war, one that began long before the first cornerstone was set. The Vatican's architects were more than builders. They were theologians in stone. They designed geometry to teach obedience. The dome mirrored heaven. The nave directed vision. The altar crowned control. But what few remember is that the first sketches of these structures were drawn not by priests, but by witches. Not witches in the stories told by inquisitors, but architects of harmony, women who understood proportion as prayer, mathematics as memory. They built with intuition, not doctrine. Their lines followed the flow of the earth, not the rule of the ruler. You walk deeper into the basilica's bones, down a passage few ever see. There, etched into the foundation stones, are markings that do not belong to the church. Spirals, suns, crescent moons. The architect's true signature. Her name has been erased from every document, but her geometry remains. She believed architecture could heal, that a building could hum like a body, that each arch and column could channel light the same way veins channel breath. She built not to impress heaven, but to reflect it. The church found her plans, studied them, admired them, then claimed them. They stripped her symbols, replaced her flowing circles with rigid right angles, her organic curves with perfect symmetry. They took her sacred geometry and called it divine order, but still, her intention lived in the stone. You run your hand along the wall, the marble hums faintly, the same frequency you have heard before. Beneath the cathedral's hierarchy lies the whisper of its original design, a structure built not for power, but resonance. The witch and the architect met once, long before she vanished. History records him as a genius. His name remains carved in stone. Hers survives only as rumor, the woman with the compass of the moon. They worked together at first. He, the student of numbers, she, the student of nature. Together, they traced the relationship between proportion and prayer. But when he presented their work to the Vatican, he omitted her name. He turned her living geometry into doctrine. He called her designs revelation and claimed divine inspiration. She watched her work transformed into weapon. Her curves straightened, her circles turned into prisons. When she confronted him, he said, "The Church cannot honor what it does not understand." She left that night. No one saw her again. But her blueprints, her true blueprints, remained hidden beneath the cathedral floor. In them, the truth still breathes. Lines that form not crosses, but spirals. Domes that echo lunar rhythm. Windows positioned to catch moonlight, not sun. You step into one of those forgotten rooms. The light filters through stained glass, shaped like petals. Dust glows in the air like drifting stars. The room hums, low, steady, alive. You realize this was her chapel, her secret. A space of balance, where masculine and feminine, heaven and earth, spirit and form met in quiet equilibrium. When the Inquisition rose, they called her an idolater, a heretic of form. But her legacy outlasted them. Even now, every cathedral built by the Church hums with her hidden touch. A curve too soft, an arch too alive, a symmetry that still remembers imperfection. You stand in that quiet space and imagine her hand sketching by candlelight, tracing lines that refuse to obey. You see her lean over her compass, her eyes reflecting flame and moon. She whispers something to herself, not a prayer, but a vow. May beauty remain beyond authority. Outside, the bells begin to toll. Their sound moves through the stone, resonating with the hum beneath your feet. For a moment, the architecture sings, a harmony of past and present, of silence reclaiming its shape. You understand now. The witch and the architect were never enemies. They were halves of a truth the Church divided. Creation and control, spirit and structure, chaos and order. And she, the forgotten one, was not destroyed. She became the blueprint the Vatican still cannot decipher, the pulse behind its marble, the ghost in its geometry. The Church built cathedrals to contain faith. She built them to release it. And tonight, her architecture finally breathes again. You walk through a corridor lined with portraits, cardinals, popes, inquisitors, saints. Their eyes are all the same, distant, polished, practiced. The walls hum with centuries of authority. Gold leaf shines where dust should live. The air feels heavy, as though every breath requires permission. This is the anatomy of power, built bone by bone, ritual by ritual, confession by confession. Power, here, does not shout. It whispers. It sanctifies itself. It learns to kneel while standing above all others. You stop before one painting, a pope holding keys in one hand and a globe in the other. His smile is faint, measured. Behind him, a shadow mirrors his pose, a shape with no face, holding the same keys, the same globe. Two authorities, overlapping, one visible, one unseen. Power was never meant to be holy. It only needed to appear so. You walk onward. The next room is filled with ledgers, scrolls, seals, the paperwork of divinity. Each document is a fragment of control disguised as duty. Here lies the record of indulgences sold, sins quantified, absolutions priced. Here are decrees that turned kings into servants and servants into subjects of God. In this room, you realize something. The Church did not conquer through faith. It conquered through administration. The body of God became bureaucracy. You open one of the scrolls. The ink has faded, but the words are clear. By decree of heaven, obedience is inheritance. You can almost hear the echo of the quill that wrote it. A man convinced he was transcribing divine law, not human desire. Power, like fear, survives through structure. It needs no miracles, only repetition. You enter another chamber, colder, darker. The walls are covered with carvings of human figures, some kneeling, some reaching upward. Their eyes are hollow, their mouths are open in silent prayer. The inscriptions beneath them read, "Blessed are those who do not question." You touch the stone. It is smooth where countless fingers have traced it in devotion. Each prayer left a fingerprint. Each fingerprint deepened obedience. The anatomy of power is not built from domination alone. It is sustained by devotion. It needs the faithful as lungs need air. Without belief, it suffocates. You move deeper. The corridor narrows, then opens into a vast hall where a marble throne stands beneath a gilded dome. Light pours through the stained glass above, splintering into colors that fall across the floor like blood and gold. The throne is empty, yet the room hums as if occupied. You approach it. Every footstep echoes louder than the last. The hum sharpens into words you cannot quite decipher. Latin, perhaps, or memory pretending to be language. You reach out to touch the throne. It is cold. You feel the vibration of countless decrees, countless voices that once sat here believing themselves immortal. The stone remembers their weight, but the hum does not come from above. It comes from below. You kneel and place your ear to the marble floor. There it is again. The familiar pulse, the buried song that has followed you since the beginning. The hum of resistance, the sound of what was silenced but not erased. Beneath the Vatican's marble heart lies another network, a labyrinth of tunnels, crypts, and vaults. The witch's ashes, the midwife's herbs, the forbidden gospels, all buried under the same foundation that claims holiness. The church stands not on sanctity, but on memory. That is the true anatomy of power. It grows not from the divine, but from what it buries. You rise and look around. The stained glass glows brighter, and for a moment, you see something in the reflection. Not the throne, not the saints, but faces. The ones who were erased. The witches, the healers, the mothers, the women who refused to kneel. Their reflections shimmer briefly in the colored light, then fade. Power survives by forgetting. But glass, like fire, never forgets what it has seen. You turn toward the exit. The hall seems to stretch endlessly now, the way time stretches around guilt. You hear faint whispers behind you, prayers spoken in the old language, the one of breath and soil. You stop and whisper back, "I remember." The hum grows louder, the lights flicker. Somewhere above, a bell rings. Not the call of command, but of collapse. The anatomy of power begins to tremble. And as you step back into the open air, you realize that every empire eventually faces the same truth. What it buries will one day become its foundation's undoing. The Vatican still stands, its domes unbroken, its bells still ringing. But beneath it, the hum grows stronger. The breath of the buried stirs. The soil beneath the marble shifts. The anatomy of power is cracking. And the world, at last, is beginning to listen. You find yourself walking through a narrow corridor beneath a convent long abandoned. The air tastes of dust and salt. Candles have not burned here in centuries, yet the smell of wax lingers, like memory refusing to leave. The walls are damp, streaked with mineral tears. You move slowly, following a faint sound ahead. A pulse, steady, low, almost human. At the end of the corridor stands a door, half rotted by time. Symbols are carved into its surface, circles within circles, moons folding into one another. They were once painted in gold, but have faded to ash. You touch the door, and it yields. Inside is a small chamber, lit by something that is not light, but memory of light. At its center, on a pedestal of stone, rests a wooden box. The grain of the wood is dark, scarred, yet warm to the touch. A name is carved into its lid, barely visible. Mater Verba, the mother of words. You open it. Inside lies a small bronze object, a pair of forceps, delicate, almost ceremonial. They are not tools of pain. They are instruments of mercy. Around their handles are faint engravings of vines, roots, and tiny stars. Beneath them rests a cloth embroidered with a single phrase: "She brought forth what heaven feared." You are looking at the relic of the midwife, a forbidden artifact hidden away during the last great purge. The legend says these forceps once belonged to a woman known only as Alina of Siena, a midwife who delivered hundreds of children in secret after the church outlawed birth without clerical blessing. She was hunted for her work, accused of consorting with demons, of using unnatural instruments. They said her touch brought new life without prayer, and that was the true heresy. You lift the relic carefully. The air vibrates when you touch it, as if the metal remembers every heartbeat it ever helped summon into the world. The hum is soft, maternal. It fills the room, and for a moment you hear voices, women whispering in languages long dead, their words overlapping in a single rhythm: breathe, push, live. This was the sound the church feared most, the sound of life beginning without permission. You remember what the archives called her: Alina, the deliverer of shadows. They wrote that her instruments were stained with blasphemy, that the children she birthed carried the devil's mark. But when the inquisitors came for her, every family she had ever helped sheltered her, hid her, lied for her. When they finally caught her, they took her tools and displayed them as proof of sorcery. The people came to see. They expected horror. But when they looked, they saw only hands that healed, instruments that protected. The people began to whisper that perhaps the devil had never been the enemy. The inquisitors silenced them with fire. But before the flames rose, one of Alina's apprentices stole the forceps and fled. She hid them beneath this convent, beneath layers of stone, prayer, and dust. You look closer. The bronze is worn smooth, yet faint traces of blood remain, not red, but blackened by time, absorbed into the metal itself. You realize it is not one woman's blood, but generations of it, the price of birth, of survival, of continuity. The relic vibrates again. The hum deepens, and the air around you changes. The walls seem to breathe. The dust stirs, and the sound of distant bells rises, not from above, but from beneath. You realize you are standing over something vast, the forgotten graves of mothers buried as heretics. The hum becomes their chorus. You see flashes, visions not of death, but of deliverance. A woman crying out in labor as another holds her hand. A candle burning beside a basin of water. A child's first breath filling a small room with something divine. The relic in your hand glows faintly. Its warmth spreads through your arm, up your chest, into your breath. It feels like memory being restored. You understand then that this relic was never about birth alone. It was a covenant, proof that creation does not need blessing, only courage. You replace it gently on the cloth. The hum softens, as if exhaling. The light fades back into shadow. As you leave the chamber, you notice an inscription above the door. Invisible when you entered, visible now. It reads, "We were not witches, we were witnesses." You step into the corridor again. The air feels lighter, as if the walls themselves have confessed. Somewhere far above, the cathedral bells toll the hour, but their sound is different. Not a command, but an echo of something older. The relic rests in silence behind you, its hum woven into the stone, waiting for the next one who remembers. And in that waiting, it remains alive. You wake in darkness, the sound of rain against stained glass, the scent of candle smoke and burning parchment. You do not know where you are at first, only that you are not alone. A voice whispers. It began with a question. You open your eyes. You are standing in a room you have seen before, the tribunal chamber. The same wooden chair, the same crucifix above the door. But something is different. The chair is empty. The books are closed. The air is warm, not cold. A man kneels in the corner, his robes soaked with rain. His hands tremble as he prays, though the words come apart in his mouth. You recognize him, an inquisitor, the one who condemned hundreds, perhaps thousands. He does not see you. You move closer. His face is pale, eyes hollow, yet his expression is not one of pride. It is fear, not of damnation, but of awakening. He whispers, "I saw her again." You wait. "She came to me," he says. "The woman from the pyre. She was not burning. She was light. She said nothing. She only looked at me, and I heard my own voice, the voice I used to condemn her, echoing from her mouth. But it was mercy, not accusation." He covers his face. "I cannot pray." You realize this is his dream, not punishment, but revelation. The church taught that repentance begins in confession, but true repentance begins in understanding. The inquisitor is dreaming the truth he refused to see. He speaks again, quieter now. "I was told to believe that every silence was guilt, that every woman who did not kneel hid the devil behind her tongue. But when she looked at me, I saw no devil. I saw peace, and I hated her for it." His tears fall onto the floor, mixing with the dust. The sound is like rain on stone. You move closer still. His voice trembles. "Do you know what I fear most?" he asks. "That God was never watching me, that it was her eyes all along." The dream shifts. The tribunal room dissolves into a field of ash. The sky is black, the ground glowing faintly with embers. In the distance, pyres burn, but their smoke rises upward, turning into columns of light. The inquisitor walks among them, his robes dragging through the ash. He calls out names, his voice breaking. Each name he speaks becomes a flame that flickers, then fades into stars. The women he condemned are not screaming, they are singing. Their voices form the hum you know so well. The inquisitor drops to his knees. "Forgive me," he says, but the air answers differently. "Remember." Forgiveness is easy. Memory is harder. He closes his eyes. "I was taught to find the devil in others, but he was in me, not as evil, but as fear. Fear of the voice that said, 'What if they are right?'" The fire brightens. The sky above glows red and gold. He stands and looks upward, tears running down his face. The flames reflect in his eyes, and for the first time, they look human. He whispers, "If I had listened, perhaps none of this." He stops. Then, quietly, "But perhaps it was never meant to be stopped. Perhaps it was meant to be seen." The dream changes again. You are now inside his mind, a hall of mirrors and echoes. Each reflection shows him at a different point in his life. The novice who believed, the judge who feared, the man who doubted. Each version watches the others. The mirrors crack. Behind the glass, light pulses. Soft, feminine, unafraid. You hear her voice again. The woman from the pyre, the healer, the midwife, the one who would not kneel. "Do you see now?" she asks. He nods, tears falling silently. She steps closer to him, not in anger, but in understanding. She touches his face. The light around her softens, blending with the darkness. "You thought you burned me," she says, "but you were the one consumed." He bows his head. "Then what am I now?" "Awake," she answers. The dream begins to dissolve. The field fades. The fire cools to ember. The hum settles into silence. When you open your eyes again, you are standing alone in the tribunal room. The chair is still empty. The crucifix above the door has cracked down the middle. The air feels lighter, almost free. You realize the inquisitor is gone, or perhaps finally at peace. His dream was his absolution. You step outside. The storm has ended. The moon is high, full, silver. The city below glows faintly with reflected light. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rings. Not for judgment, but release. The Inquisitor's dream will never be written in scripture, but its truth will echo in every place where silence once ruled. It will live in every question whispered in fear, in every woman who dares to speak, in every man brave enough to listen. You walk into the night, feeling the hum beneath your feet again. It sounds softer now, less like resistance, more like reconciliation. The dream has ended, but the awakening has begun. You enter a long hallway lit by hundreds of candles. The air is thick with wax and the faint perfume of incense. Statues line the corridor, saints carved in marble, each holding an instrument of their martyrdom. Spears, chains, roses, thorns. Their faces are calm, serene, distant. But as you walk, you realize something unsettling. Their eyes follow you, not with holiness, with memory. This is the mirror of the saints. The church built it to remind the faithful of sacrifice. But beneath the sculpted perfection, another truth hides, that many of these saints were once condemned as heretics, witches, rebels. The church killed them first, then sanctified them later. You stop before a statue of Saint Apollonia. Her mouth is slightly open, her teeth missing. She was martyred by having them torn out. But before her canonization, she was accused of witchcraft for healing through prayer and touch. Her name was purged, rewritten, resurrected in marble. Her pain made holy only when it was convenient. You touch the stone. It hums faintly, the same hum. The saints' faces shimmer under the candlelight. They seem alive, as though caught between worship and warning. You look closer and see faint carvings behind the official inscriptions. Small sigils, moons, spirals. The same marks from the old covens, carved by hands that remembered the truth. The mirror of the saints was never meant to reflect heaven. It reflected guilt. The Vatican knew that memory, once burned, had to be replaced with something new. So it took the very women it silenced and refashioned them as saints. The healers became martyrs. The midwives became virgins. The witches became saints of impossible purity. It was the ultimate transmutation. Blasphemy turned holy. You walk further. Each statue tells the same story. A woman punished for knowledge, reborn in stone. Saint Brigid, whose fire was once pagan. Saint Walburga, whose oils once healed the sick. Saint Hildegard, whose visions came not from angels, but from sound and color. Each canonized to erase the evidence of resistance. You begin to understand. The church did not destroy the witches. It canonized them. The mirror of the saints was the church's act of alchemy, transforming rebellion into reverence. But marble cannot lie. The eyes of the statues still remember who they were. You stop before the last figure, Saint Mary Magdalene. Her feet are bare, her hands folded, her face soft but knowing. The inscription reads, "Redeemed of sin." But behind it, carved so faintly you almost miss it, is another phrase, "Teacher of light." The marble around her pulses faintly with warmth. You feel the air tremble, and for an instant, the candle flames lean toward her. You realize you are not alone. Her voice, quiet, steady, fills the hall. "They built me in stone so I could not speak, but I still remember the sound of my own breath." The other statues hum in answer. Their resonance grows, overlapping into a low, haunting chord. It vibrates through the marble floor, through your bones. This is the sound of the forgotten reclaiming themselves. The saints begin to change, not visibly, but vibrationally. The energy in the room shifts from obedience to remembrance. The marble no longer feels cold. It feels alive, trembling with recognition. You see their shadows move against the walls. They are no longer bound by halos, but by memory. The memory of what they were before they were sanctified. And in that trembling, you hear the truth. The saints were not chosen for their purity. They were chosen for their defiance. The church turned rebellion into symbol. But symbol cannot contain spirit. You step back and look down the corridor one last time. The saints seem to exhale, their stone faces softening, their eyes glowing faintly in the candlelight. They do not need to be freed. They only need to be remembered. The mirror of the saints hums again, and you realize that the church's greatest monument is also its confession. It has preserved, in marble and myth, every soul it tried to erase, and tonight they have awakened. You walk through a door of smoke. It curls around you like breath made visible. The floor beneath your feet feels soft, not stone, but compacted ash. You look down and realize what it is. Burned pages, burned bodies, burned history. This is the Gospel of Ashes, the book the church never wrote, yet could never stop writing. It lives beneath every archive, every sermon, every sanctified lie. The ashes hold what words could not. They whisper when you move, the faint hiss of fire that never died. You kneel and touch the ground. It feels warm. Your fingers come away grey. But as you look closer, you see faint letters forming where you touched. Words written not in ink, but in carbon. They shimmer briefly before fading. We are the verses that survived. You exhale. The air fills with dust and memory. The gospel begins to speak. It does not have a voice, but thousands, overlapping, layered, indistinguishable from one another. Midwives, healers, daughters, mothers. Some whisper prayers, others hum. A few laugh softly, as if death had only made them freer. Their story unfolds not as history, but as rhythm. You see flashes, torches raised against the night, books thrown into fire, lips moving in silent prayer. You see priests standing in judgment, faces lit by the same flames they called holy. You see the ashes carried by wind across fields, into rivers, into mouths that would one day speak their names again. The Gospel of Ashes is not written. It breathes. Its pages are the wind. Its ink is what remains when words are gone. You walk deeper into the room. The air shimmers like heat above stone. Around you, ashes rise and swirl, forming faint shapes. Women standing in circles, their arms raised. They are not ghosts. They are remnants of sound. Each one hums a single note, together forming a harmony that bends the air. The church said the devil sang through them. But this was never the devil's song. It was creation continuing itself. You remember what one inquisitor wrote in his diary before he died. They burn, and yet I hear music. I fear we are destroying the choir of the world. You realize now he was right. The witches' voices were not curses, but chords, the frequencies of life itself. Fire could not silence them. It only changed their key. You feel it now, the resonance traveling through your ribs, into your breath, your pulse. You close your eyes. The sound fills you. For a moment, you are part of it. One vibration among thousands, a verse inside the unending song. When you open your eyes, the ashes glow faintly. Faces appear in them, not as spirits, but as memories too stubborn to fade. Their eyes are calm, steady, knowing. One steps forward, her outline faint, her form flickering like smoke. They thought they ended us, she says, her voice the sound of flame remembering itself. But we became the air. You reach out, but your hand passes through her. She smiles. We were never meant to stay. We were meant to return. You ask her, return to what? To everything, she answers. The ashes begin to rise again, swirling faster, forming a spiral that stretches upward into darkness. You realize the room is not a tomb. It's a passage. The gospel is ascending, turning back into light. Every whisper, every hum, every name burned into silence now lifts like smoke into the sky. You hear their last line, their final scripture, echoing as the air trembles. You cannot destroy what has already become the world. The ashes settle. The chamber grows quiet. You stand alone, surrounded by silence so deep it feels alive. You look down. and the ground beneath your feet glows faintly, veins of light pulsing through the soot. The gospel of ashes has not disappeared. It has rewritten itself inside the world. Every tree that grows from soil touched by those ashes carries their memory. Every river that flowed through burned fields hums their song. Every breath drawn by the living is part of their resurrection. You walk toward the doorway of smoke once more. Behind you, the ash floor glows brighter, a soft gold spreading outward like sunrise through dust. You understand now that the gospel of ashes is not a story of death, but of persistence. It is the scripture of what refuses to vanish. And as you step back into the night, the wind carries the faint scent of smoke. You breathe it in, not with sorrow, but recognition. For every word you speak now is built from what they left behind. And the world, at last, begins to remember its own creation. The wind carries it first, the faintest trace of sweetness mixed with ash, the scent of something once alive, now transfigured. You walk across a field that glows faintly under the weight of moonlight. The soil here is grey, soft as breath, and yet it pulses faintly beneath your feet, as though remembering fire. This is where she was born, the child of smoke. The legends say she came from a pyre that refused to die. They say the flames bent inward, and from the heart of the fire a cry was heard, not of agony, but of birth. The witnesses fled, thinking it an omen, but one woman remained. She stepped closer, through the heat, through the crackling wood, and there she found her. A child wrapped not in cloth, but in light. Her skin was pale as ash, her breath shimmering like heat itself. The church called her abomination. The people called her miracle. You stand at the center of the field now. The air vibrates, the same hum you have followed since the beginning, but softer here, as if waiting. You kneel and touch the soil. It is warm. When you close your eyes, you see flashes. The child growing, walking barefoot through forests that burned behind her. Her touch left no scars, only smoke that glowed like memory. The records speak of her only once. In a Vatican letter dated 1622, the child born of fire must be found. Her breath turns prayer to dust. Her eyes are embers of heresy. They never found her, but stories persisted. Farmers swore they saw her at the edge of their fields, watching crops grow in weeks instead of months. Travelers spoke of a girl who appeared before great disasters, plagues, storms, wars, not to cause them, but to witness. She was never older, never younger, always the same. The child of smoke was not a person. She was a remnant, the embodied memory of every witch, every mother, every healer, burned but unforgotten. You hear footsteps. The air thickens. Then she appears. She looks no older than 12. Her hair is silver, her eyes the color of ember before it cools. She moves without sound, yet every step leaves a faint glow behind her. She looks at you as if she already knows your name. "You came," she says simply. Her voice is soft, but it carries through the night. You try to speak, but your throat tightens. You feel as though you are standing before the echo of every story you have ever heard. She steps closer. The air around her bends, flickers. "They burned the body," she says, "but not the breath. The breath became me." Her words are not explanation. They are revelation. "They thought the fire ended us," she continues, "but the fire was only a doorway." You look at her hands. They shimmer faintly, not with flame, but with light caught between life and memory. You ask her, "What do you want?" She smiles, not kindly, not cruelly, but knowingly. To be remembered correctly. The ground hums louder now. The field begins to glow, veins of gold spreading through the ash. She kneels, pressing her palm to the soil. Where she touches, small shoots of green rise through the grey. This is what they feared, she whispers. Regrowth, continuation, that what burns can bloom again. You watch as the plants grow taller, trembling under the moonlight. Their leaves shimmer, their stems glow faintly, as if lit from within. You realize it is not fire that keeps them alive. It is remembrance. The church thought it destroyed us, she says, but it only changed our form. We became story, then silence, then song. She looks up at you, and for a moment, her eyes reflect centuries. Now, we are waking. The wind picks up. Ash swirls into spirals around her. The field becomes a sea of moving light. The plants tremble, bending as though bowing to her. She stands, lifts her hand, and for a heartbeat, you see every face from before. The midwives, the healers, the nuns in secret circles. They are all her. She takes a deep breath and exhales. Smoke rises, not dark, but silver, curling upward into the sky. It twists, reshapes, becomes something vast, the outline of wings, the memory of a choir. The wind carries it eastward, toward the city that once condemned her kind. You whisper, "Where will you go?" She answers, "Home, where the fire began." She begins to fade, not vanish, but disperse, dissolving into mist and light. Her last words hang in the air like scripture written in breath. Tell them the fire learned to love. When she is gone, the field is quiet again. Only the hum remains. You look at your hands. They are dusted with silver ash that glows faintly in your skin. You feel warmth, not heat, renewal, not destruction. You walk away, but the world feels different now, softer, wider, alive. The child of smoke is gone, but her breath lingers in the wind, in the soil, in the sound of your own heartbeat. And somewhere above, the sky flickers, not with lightning, but with remembrance. You travel north, through forests veined with mist and memory, until you find it, a cloister built into the side of a mountain. It does not appear on any map. No pilgrim path leads here. It hides in silence, surrounded by rose bushes that bloom even in snow. Their petals are the color of dusk, their thorns silver. This is the last sanctuary of the forgotten. The secret order of the rose. You push open the iron gate. It creaks softly, as though reluctant to let you in. The courtyard beyond is empty, except for a fountain in the shape of a woman holding a chalice. Water flows from her hands, clear as glass. Around her, the roses climb the walls like veins of living fire. You hear footsteps. From the archway emerges a figure, an old woman in a grey robe, her hair white, her face lined but luminous. She looks at you with eyes that have seen centuries. "You've come far," she says. "Most don't find us until the world is ready to remember." Her voice is soft but weighted. You ask, "Are you the keeper?" She nods. "One of many. We are not sisters of faith. We are sisters of memory." She gestures for you to follow. You walk through the cloister's hallways, past murals painted not of saints, but of women, midwives, astronomers, healers, scribes. Each holds a rose instead of a cross. The petals drip with dew that never dries. "We preserve what the fire could not," she says. "The knowledge, the songs, the names." You ask, "And who built this place?" She smiles. "Those who refuse to forget. When the witch hunts ended, when the ashes settled, we gathered what remained. Texts, relics, memories. The Vatican hid its sins in vaults. We planted ours." She leads you into the cloister's heart, a garden enclosed by stone arches. Roses of every color bloom there, but not from soil. They grow from parchment buried beneath the earth. Burned pages turned to root, ink turned to life. Each rose hums softly, a note in a harmony of remembrance. You realize this garden is a living archive. Each flower contains the essence of a forgotten truth. The old woman kneels beside one and touches its petals. This one, she says, came from the diary of a woman condemned in Florence. She wrote that God lived in the hands of those who healed. The church called it heresy. We call it prayer. She plucks a petal and places it in your palm. It glows faintly. You feel warmth spread through you, not light, but understanding. These roses, she continues, feed on silence. The more the world forgets, the stronger they bloom. You walk further into the garden. In its center stands a circular pool, still and dark. Beneath the water's surface, faint lights move like stars. The old woman says, "Each one is a memory too heavy for words. They rest until the world is ready to face them." You kneel beside it and peer into the water. For a moment, you see your reflection. Then it shifts. You see faces, the witches, the saints, the inquisitor dreaming, the child of smoke. Their images ripple, merge, dissolve into one another. You whisper, "Are they gone?" The old woman shakes her head. "Gone? No, we do not vanish. We transform. Every age buries its truth, and every age must dig it up again. That is our purpose." She stands, gestures toward the roses climbing the wall. Each bloom holds the memory of one forgotten woman. Each thorn guards her from being idolized. We do not worship them. We remember them. A wind passes through the garden. The roses tremble, their petals glowing faintly in unison. The hum rises, filling the air with a sound like breathing. The old woman closes her eyes. "They are listening," she says. "They always listen when someone arrives who still believes in remembering." You ask, "What will happen when they all remember?" She smiles, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Then the church will fall silent, not from ruin, from revelation." You stay in the garden until dawn. When light spills over the mountains, it touches every rose, every stone, every memory. The hum fades into morning birdsong. Before you leave, the woman gives you a small vial filled with rose petals. "Take it," she says. "When you forget who you are, open it. You'll hear the hum again." You ask her name. She hesitates, then says, "We have no names here, only echoes." You walk down the mountain path. Behind you, the cloister dissolves into mist, as if it was never there. But in your pocket, the vial glows softly, pulsing in rhythm with your heartbeat. You know now that the Order of the Rose is not a secret society. It is a living truth, scattered through time. Every woman who dares to remember, every voice that refuses to kneel, every act of creation that blooms in the shadow of control. And somewhere far behind you, in the mist, the roses hum again. Their song is not mourning, it is promise. The promise that what was buried in silence will always rise in bloom. Before this chapter closes, remember, this isn't just a story, it's a door. And somewhere behind it, another one is already opening. If the Vatican's shadow still lingers in your mind, if the whisper of the witches still hums in your chest, then you've already heard the call. Subscribe now, turn the bell, stay close. The next revelation isn't coming tomorrow. It's already waking beneath the marble of belief.